Hey, thanks for coming, everybody. We're Trifonic. I'm Brian.
I'm Lawrence.
We're brothers. And yeah, so today I'm excited to sort of go through the production process of our music, and it's not only just like sort of how to make a certain sound, but also a lot of it that I sort of interested in and is the process of like how an idea develops. Um, and hopefully, depending on because I'm going to be using Logic today, but if depending on like whatever you use, hopefully it should be applicable, and at least the process, you know, is relevant, I think, to any program. So yeah, I'm going to talk about a couple different things, and then Lawrence is going to talk about the business side of stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to let Brian start off. He's going to go through the nitty gritty of some of the production process, and I'm going to come back up here at the end, talk a little bit more generally about how we work together, sort of what our workflow is like a bit, and then also about sort of the business and marketing side, which I handle. So there we go.
Okay, cool. So just to give you an introduction sort of what we do, I'm going to show you a video of ours of the track Parks on Fire, and then I'll go through the production process on this song. Okay, so yeah, we pulled that together in an afternoon. No, that was that took a very long time, and it's probably from start to finish that song. I mean, with some gaps in between, was about a year and a half. So it wasn't quick, and as you'll see, it could have gone in a bunch of different directions, and it didn't start out with any particularly unique or amazing ideas, but I think it developed nicely over time. And then, of course, it's really great to have a super cool video by our friend Scott Pagano. So anyway, what we're looking at here is the very first session. And basically, at the time, I was listening to a lot of like minimal techno stuff and sort of clicky music. And like Murkoff is someone that I really like, and so I was just trying to like I didn't really know much about that production style, at least in terms of what was happening. So I was trying to sort of imitate it. So I'll play you. This is the very first session from here. So pretty stripped down, just trying to get a little clicky beat. But the interesting thing from even this very simple session is that a lot of these sort of clicking sounds actually became themes that you hear in the final finished version, or are there at least in the background. And so I don't know, like a lot of things, like the starting place was just basically anywhere. And so I was just trying to gather a bunch of click sounds. And so there's a number of different ways to make that sort of thing. So in this case, it started as a piece of a cello sample. So I'll make this bigger so that you all can see what's happening here. So if I zoom out here, this is like the sort of attack part of a cello, and it's stretched. The end there, you can hear you can see these wave cycles are repeating. So it's kind of all stretched out. So there's that little clicky bit, and then I have this little thing here. I'll zoom out here, and so basically made this out of a little piece of cello audio, and then these clicking sounds. I was just experimenting. So what I did was, let's let's see if I zoom in here. Basically just took a few samples and normalized it, to increase the gain of just this little section to make just a little peak. And then just copied and pasted it in a pattern that looked nice. and it sounded cool too. I wanted something that sort of slowed down. But really, pretty primitive. But I was curious just to explore audio and see what I could do with that. And the sound that ended up happening that I like and that actually does end up in the final track, even though not much else in this session does, is this combination of things here. So more or less all I did was just take this audio portion here and spread it out across a few tracks. And if you look at sort of the EQ on it, here's the original here, it's pretty extreme. It's it's really high pass filtered and then boosting the highs, because without that, it's a really boomy sound. Very different sort of like knocking sound than these really top end clicks. And so then on each channel here, the panning's a little bit different. The EQ effects chain, and there's some like reverb and delay on some of them. And so that was a way of sort of adding more interest to this little clicking sound. But other than that, there's not too much going on in here in this very first session. Had a little piano hit, kind of nice. And I think probably what actually makes that sound interesting is that there's a distortion on here, trash, and if you get rid of that, sounds a lot different. So it even changes kind of the melodic tonality of it, just the way it distorts. Anyway, this is sort of starting place. And by the way, like as I go through anything or demonstrating anything, feel free to ask any questions, or that you can jump in with anything. So okay, so this is sort of the highlights, because there's something like, I think there's more than 60 sessions for this song. So I'm going to show just a few of them, because otherwise it would take all year. So this next session here, I think I'd start to develop this idea a little bit more and add a little bit more clicks. I was trying to get more variety of that, because again, that's sort of the time that's what I was listening to, is the clicky sounds, but and added in a little 808 kick drum sort of thing. And basically what I wanted to do as well was, I wanted to do something in 6/8. It's one of my favorite time signatures, and just because it has this feeling of perpetual motion, I feel like it keeps moving forward. I guess any of the sort of meters that are based on 3 feel like that they have this momentum to it that's nice, and you don't hear it too much in electronic music. So I was like, all right, let me explore this. So in this session, basically, I have the same things that were before, and now that it's just consolidated into one audio file here. And I'll make this window bigger so that when I click on other audio files that you can see clearly. So I just combined those clicks from the last session, and then what I have here is another set of clicky style sounds. And these ones I have, again, and you'll notice that this is sort of a common technique that I'll use in terms of production, is explore sort of the same sounds spread out on a few different tracks. And a lot of times I like to work with actual audio slices here. Like that's what I'm dealing with here, instead of MIDI, just because you can see, you can be very precise where things cut off. And of course you can do that with MIDI as well. It's just with audio, like what you see is what you get. Yes?
Do you find that you immediately render things to audio?
Yeah, and yes, definitely. And for the people that are watching this streaming, I think what I'll do is repeat questions, just because there's a couple people that are watching this on the internet. So he was asking if I usually render things to audio immediately, and I like to do that, yeah, because I just feel like that also it forces you to sort of move forward. You process something to audio, and then you can just continue on with it and continue to process it more. Because the way that I look at it now, and not to go off on too much of like a tangent, but on a philosophical end, but it's like we have more options than ever in terms of producing music and software and plugins and effects. And the beautiful thing is like we have access to it now, and it's not that expensive, and that's great. And you have unlimited undo and saves. But at the same time, I think it can also be sort of stifling when you have too many choices. It's really hard to make decisions. It's really hard to be confident in your decisions. So in some ways, when you print something to audio, I mean, you can always undo it or go back to a previous thing. But like I find that I just don't do that as much. When I print something to audio, I usually just move forward. So I like to do that because I think by nature sometimes I can be indecisive, and the more that sometimes I'll dwell on something or think about it, then the more you begin to question it. So I think it's a balance of going with your instincts on things and also using your better judgment. But sometimes if you overthink stuff, it can be take away from what originally you were feeling or trying to do. So that's sort of a long answer to a simple question, but yeah, no, I definitely like to print things to audio, and in this case, basically what these are just like the first little snippets of it was some drum slices, and so I've in this audio file there's a couple different ones, and some of these other ones that are really high pitched. If we look at it here, let's see here. So if I zoom in real far, you can see that this waveform is very repetitive in a small way. So to get these like little high-pitched sounds, what I tried to do is just take a little bit like this and literally just copy it and paste it in the sample editor. So it started as probably this little portion here. But there's a lot you can do with these like simple tools that we forget about, because like now there's like so many awesome tools for synthesis and sampling and doing granular things, and you forget about like the old school like in a sample editor copying and pasting things as a way of experimenting and generating sounds. So copying these little short bits of a wave cycle, you can get all sorts of interesting clicks and high-pitched sounds, that sort of sound, which this sound in particular also sort of became a thematic element in the track like later on. So in this audio file here, there's a bunch of different clicks, and then I have them just spread out here. And like I was saying before, what I like to do is spread them out on a few different tracks, mess around with the panning. And the way I like to work in terms of workflow is you'll see that there's a lot of muted regions in here, like these ones like this here that are grayed out. And so I'll usually pile in a bunch of stuff, like work on a small segment of something. And this is usually before I have any understanding of what the bigger picture is. Because at this point, when you're working on a track, it's basically you're just messing around. And so I'll start with, like in this case, a 4-bar loop, and just explore, like, okay, what happens if I do this, and try to, everyone's different in that way too. I mean, that's not necessarily like if you have a whole idea for a track, that's by all means it makes the most sense to just map it out and then worry about the sounds. But a lot of times I'll start something, and I don't really know where I'm going or what's going to happen with it. So I like to just sort of play around with it and add in other elements and then make decisions about what works and doesn't. So in this case, in this session, you can see there's some muted things in here as well. Like there's this gamelan that for like 5 seconds I thought was pretty cool. But it really just kind of interferes and doesn't add anything. So that got muted and probably in the next session just deleted out of it altogether. So I'll move forward with this. Let's see where this goes next. Okay. All right, so this session, let's see what's happening. So again, this is still exploring that very minimal with a classical influence kind of sound that at the time I was listening to a lot of. So in this session, basically added in a little bit more piano, made a couple more decisions about what's happening here. Production-wise, I don't think there's anything that's that interesting, except there are these beeping sounds, which let's see if they play. So that was one of those clicks from before, and then here's one with a reverb. And again, printed to audio very early on so that I can have very precise control over, like, for example, some hits have reverb, some don't, that sort of thing. Just exploring very minimal piano thing. So let's see. I believe what happens next with this is that then I start to, like, it felt to me like this was dragging a bit. So what I wanted to do was figure out some kind of 6/8 pattern that felt like was moving along but didn't feel like a waltz, or wasn't just obvious like 1 2 3 1 2 3 kind of thing, unless that was going to work. But I couldn't make that work. So I sort of got put together a jazzy cut up beat. So. So, still exploring the same kind of theme, these same original sounds, but depending on how many times you've heard Parks and Fire, then you might recognize that this is one of the main beat aspects of the track. And again, this beat is all constructed of audio. It started as actually kind of it's like more of a down-tempo loop. Here, I'll show it to you here. Make this big so that everyone can see. So it's basically like a trip hop like drum thing. I think it's from Planet of the Breaks. It's like Sean Lee has a sample CD. It's called Planet of the Breaks. It's really good. I highly recommend it as like source material to sample from, because one, it's not too expensive. Two, you're not going to run into any legal issues if you purchase it. Also, it's like he recorded. I believe he recorded all the sounds to vinyl and had it mastered to vinyl, and then they ripped it, digitized that and made the sample CD from it. So it's really gritty and really interesting beats in there. But I didn't want to just, I have a little, like, I don't know, maybe too much pride, or it just wasn't working. It was a little too slow. So I decided to try to chop it up, and that's how I got this sort of. And I put a couple of hits on other tracks, like this one here, and notice this one has a delay on it, this dub station. And that's just a little accent that happens. So just on its own, just so you hear what's happening with that one hit. There's this dubbed out hit that sort of works in conjunction with the rest of it here. And in terms of the construction of it, since it's all with slices, you can do little things in terms of gating the lengths of some of the slices to get interesting patterns, or to have it cut off in a sort of unnatural way. Because I wanted it to sound natural, like like live drums, not synthetic, but at the same time to do something that that sounds a little glitchy, or that doesn't sound like something that a human could really play. Yeah, that's, I think, in this. Yeah, I just cut it up because what you can do is, so things have changed since I worked on this, which is for the better, which is great. Because at the time, I was in Logic 7, and there wasn't the like warping tools or the flex audio that you now have in Logic, and you didn't have transient detection in Logic, so it was a very different process. So basically, what I had to do was just go in, and then just chop it up in the arrange and just like crop it, basically the start and end points, things like that, get it all so that each hit was individual. And there wasn't really an easier automated process at the time. So yeah, I just chopped it up by hand and just do little copy and paste things. And over time, depending on the computer I'm on, I got pretty fast with it. On my laptop, and I'm still getting used to. I'm like working on different key commands on different computers, so it's a little different. But once you start getting into a certain workflow, you can get pretty fast at doing it. So I got pretty fast at moving around audio and copying and pasting bits, and getting them all to work together. So let's see, where does this go next? I'm going to repeat the question for the people listening. So he's asking if I use groove quantization for things. Definitely. I mean, a lot of times it's either, whether it be moving around the audio slices by hand, or actually in the events list, you can quantize slices. And now in Logic 9, you can just straight up quantize audio. In terms of like grooves with swing and things like that, sometimes I'm getting more into that now. Like, because I didn't, at this time I wasn't really exploring that as much. And when I listen back to things, sometimes I feel like it's like sometimes it's a little rigid. So definitely exploring more groove. And I think in the last few years that there's more of that has come about, I think, in music as well. And especially like, when I heard, I don't know if any of you listened to Burial, he's like a dubstep, sort of on the fringe of it. But like he doesn't even use a sequencer. He uses like SoundForge and copy and paste audio slices, like not against any grid, and it just slides around, and it's great. Like it's all kinds of beats and grooves that like I'd never heard, and like was really inspiring, and that made me want to think about, okay, maybe I don't want things so rigid. I want things to be tight, but there's a difference between tight and really rigid feeling. So still kind of figuring that out, but yeah, definitely things are quantized. And in terms of grooves and things like that, I'm just beginning to explore that now. So I think on the music that exists, that we've worked on as Trifonic, there's not too much like groove templates and swing that's happening. So let's see. Okay, so this session's in some ways like a digression. Like I was like, oh well, I have the jazzy beat. Maybe I need an upright bass in here. Like maybe that's because this is still before I have any vision of like, okay, this is going to be Parks on Fire and it's going to have this sort of feeling. I have a little upright bass in this one. And I mean, like, it's kind of cool, but it's sort of not. And but sometimes you have to go that direction. That's part of what I want to like express about the creative process, or at least for me, is that like I think to know that you're making the right decisions about something, sometimes you have to go down whatever path that you think about. That you're like, maybe I should try this, because like by going in this direction and playing around with the Seinfeld bass, it's like I realized I was like, okay, this could work if in some other context, but this isn't really right for where it just totally changed the mood. And sometimes that's good. Sometimes that if you're in a rut, like that can really fix it. Like if you change the whole feeling of it, because this one part really, it started as something that was minimal and kind of dark and had this classical feeling to it, and then all of a sudden it's somewhere in jazz territory, and I realized that's not the direction to go with it. So that was why I sort of pulled out this this session. Let's see here. So this next one is where I started recording some acoustic guitars, and by trade or by background, I'm a guitarist. So that's something that I do whenever I get stuck, when I run into a wall, is just start recording guitars and see what I can come up with, and see if that pulls it in some direction. So in this case, I just recorded against what we just heard before, minus the upright bass. So some of those guitars also are in the, well actually I think all those guitars ended up in the final version, just in a different context, not against this jazzy beat here. But I'll show you the different parts, because I think they're interesting. So there's that backwards acoustic theme that sort of that develops during the peak of the song, and that I really like in the final version how that transitions it from something that's more moody to something that feels uplifting for even just for a brief moment before it drops to something that's heavier. But it's kind of like a bridge section. It's different than anything else before, and so the guitars add something that's lighter, this feeling of nature and whatnot to it. And so basically, to get this part backwards, you can see that each note in here was just sliced up, and basically I just copied them to their own region, so it's its own audio file, and reversed it. There might be simpler ways to do that nowadays, or like if I loaded it into a sampler and then you could reverse all the samples and play the part back with MIDI might be easier. But let's see, I have this part not backwards. Where is that? So that was the original recording of it. There's the mistake in it. But so that's why I used that first little bit there. But yeah, I just wanted to explore. I was like, all right, how can I? Because there's when you're going to reverse something, you have a couple choices. I could reverse this whole loop here, and then the order of it would play backwards, and I could figure out the part backwards, and and then it could flip it around. It would work, but it's just easier to cheat it a little bit and just cut up each note and reverse them individually. And so the next layer of guitar here, just guitar harmonics. You can hear that my monitoring in the background wasn't very well isolated. I really like guitar harmonics just as a texture, and so you'll notice there's lots of that and sort of all the triphonic stuff. Here's another track of. And for any guitarists out there, a good way to do that, to come up with guitar harmonic parts, is to because you're kind of limited based on your tuning, like you can only get certain like natural harmonics on the 12th and 7th frets that really ring out. But if you tune the strings completely different, then you end up getting a whole new set of harmonics. So that's what I would try to think of the line that I wanted to play with harmonics, and then tune the guitar differently. And I have no idea. I mean, but it ends up being usually some kind of open tuning. I don't even worry about necessarily how it works, because I'll use the tuning usually just to play that one part. But it's also kind of nice too. Like if you play an instrument for a long time, you tend to rehash the same ideas again and again on it. So, like when I pick up a guitar, I tend to play probably the same Metallica riff that I first learned. That of like Master of Puppets or something like that. And or if I end up improvising something on guitar, it ends up being the same lines that I always play and that sort of thing. And it's really hard to break out of that, especially the more years that you have behind you with an instrument. So sometimes it's nice if you tune it differently, especially a guitar. Like then I lose all sense of knowing the instrument, and it's more just exploring it with my ear. And it's a fresh perspective on things, which I think is really nice and really inspiring. Because yeah, that's sort of how I got into exploring the harmonics, was just tuning it differently, and I don't really know how to play chords when it's tuned all crazy. So and it's cool to get different parts. Let's see, another part, just another harmonic part. And so these all kind of work together to make a really nice lush thing. And here's the backwards part with that. And what I really liked about this sort of collection of guitar parts was that it was something kind of like that upright bass before, where it totally changes the context and the mood of what's happening, but it did it in a good way. Like I could see, oh, this is a direction I like. I could see it evolving into a lighter direction at some point. So it was sort of the seeds for that. And let's see if there's anything else guitar-wise or production-wise in this session that's interesting. I think this is probably just, yeah, just more takes of the same thing. Yeah, so so in like Logic 9, for example, if you control click, you can convert to new audio files, and so that will create a whole new audio file for this region here. So then I could reverse it, and I'd still have the original. Or um, I mean, now like there's so much you can do in terms of because there's transient detection, so you could have it analyze the file and get it all set right, and then you can do a slice at transient. So I'll demonstrate real quick. So if I control click, I can do slice at transient markers. So then it makes slices of all my transients. I could highlight all of these here, control click, and do convert to new audio files. And so then it would convert them all to new audio files, and I could reverse them. So there might even be other more efficient ways. My specialty, as you might see, is not necessarily in efficiency, but I try to put a lot of thought into what I do, and it's great because I learn all the time. There's so many, just from working in the programs, and I teach some classes here at PeerMind, and learning from students and things like I learn new ways to do things that I was like, oh wow, I was doing that really inefficiently. But that's one way you could do it, and especially using these transient markers and slice at transients. It really speeds up that process. So back in Logic 7, couldn't really do that.
From the internet, someone wants to know, were the harmonics done on acoustic guitar as well?
Yeah, the harmonics were done on acoustic guitar, because I really like how it resonates on acoustic, and in this case, like I don't know, there's something that, especially later, like in the reason why the song became titled Parks on Fire as it developed, is like that it sort of was instrumentally exploring this theme of nature. And so I guess growing up in Berkeley and all, and seeing hippies play acoustic guitar, I connect acoustic guitar and nature together. Or maybe there's some link because it's built out of wood and all of that. But yes, acoustic guitar for the harmonic parts. Yeah. Oh, okay. Let's see. So he's asking about this third layer of guitar. What's happening to this crossfade? I think, I don't know. There could have been a pop there or something, or maybe I'm not sure. Let's see what's happening here. I don't know. Nothing. It looks like this crossfade isn't really doing anything in this case. Sometimes, especially back when I was recording this, I had a Motu interface that was giving me problems. Maybe also my computer was too slow, but I'd sometimes get pops in my audio while I was recording, or the buffer size was too low, that sort of thing. So I know in some of these sessions I had to do a lot of crossfading to just, like, if there's a pop that's happening and it wasn't one that I can just draw out with the pencil tool, to find another section that's sustaining of that same part and then crossfade to get it to be natural. So, oh yes, question. I don't know if it cuts it. It doesn't cut it necessarily at a zero crossing. It cuts it wherever you set your transient marker. So when it does the analysis, so like, okay, so if I go and set analysis on this, it's going to cut it wherever these are, and these aren't necessarily right on the transient. Man, I need a bigger screen for all this. So in this case, so this isn't on a zero crossing here, and but in this, it doesn't matter too much it depends on the sound and depends what you're doing with it too. And I think what I did a lot of times, at least back before there was all this transient detection and cool tools that make life a lot easier, I think let's see, where's that one where it's reversed? I think it's up here. Okay. So I may have done fade-ins and fade-outs on these at the beginning. Yeah. So sort of making my own zero crossing on it. So notice here's the end of the file here. And if I zoom in really far, you see it totally fades out to 0. And I just did that in the sample editor. Like if you select an area and you can, under its functions menu, you've got fade in, fade out, that sort of thing. So yeah, I guess to avoid clicks and pops, that's good. Will, was there internet question?
Yeah, someone wanted to know if you're planning a book or some other way to teach people.
I don't know. I'm not planning a book at this time. I'd like to make more music, so I think a book would take too much time. Yeah. So, and there's some music that's in progress that I know both Lawrence and I are itching to have done and to spend the time to complete. But I definitely enjoy teaching and definitely enjoy talking. So, if there's other opportunities to do that, then I'll do it. So let's see. I'll move on here to another session. Oh, that didn't close that project. Okay. I'm not going to save that. So this next group of sessions is, so again, this is a different workflow than from what I would probably do now. But at the time, when I wanted to do my editing, use OS 9. I had Logic 6 on an OS 9 computer, because with it I had a Pro Tools system. So I had a TDM system, and it allowed for some cool editing because I had Audio Suite plugins, so I could process directly the waveform, which is cool. So I'm going to open up these OS 9 sessions, which look a little different and sometimes give me a little trouble, but should be okay. So well, this one looks okay. So this is where I just started editing the acoustic guitars, just to really get them tight in time. Because in the in the case of a song like Parks on Fire and electronic music, like quantization is very important, or timing, and especially for live instruments to actually blend in with the background for what I was going for. Like there's other methods too. I mean, you listen to someone like Fortet, and it's a much looser feel with his electronics, and it's great. I mean, it's brilliant, like actually how well it all blends, but it's in a different way that's, it's tight in a loose way. So this is just doing editing, and I think that's all that's happening here. Oh, let's see if the session's going to play or if it's going to give me troubles. Uh-oh.